Wednesday, May 22nd, we've got a mailbag for you, but it's a little bit different. We got Jack McMullen pinch hitting here on a Wednesday mailbag. You've been long overdue to get into the lineup here. We're going to be talking about some guys that should be getting into the lineup for some big league teams, but Jack, you've been overdue for a mailbag. You're joining me, and I've been itching to do a mail. I love doing them with Peter, of course, always. It's a blast, but I don't even know the last time I've done one with you as well. So other than the prospect mailbags, welcome back to the big league mailbags.
It's about damn time. You guys were like boxing me out of the
Yeah.
mailbags, and I felt
Yeah.
so disrespected. But this is like the first pillar that you're building on, the side of the river, and we're gonna slowly build the bridge back. Is that okay?
So I approached Peter before the season. I said, let's just make the mailbag our thing.
Yeah.
Let's box Jack out. I know his AAA schedule. We can just schedule these exactly when
Yeah.
he has to
It's
call
like,
a game.
oh, we
Oh
bad
no.
time, like it doesn't work. Scheduling quirk. Sorry about that.
Oh my gosh, 10th straight week where it doesn't line up. I can't
Crazy.
believe it. I I mean, how would I ever know? But no, so we get to do this and we have some good questions. We got a lot. And I will say though, I might be back out on doing mailbags with you because I always thought Peter was ambitious, and as he always is with content and how much. If it was up to Peter, I think every episode would be 2 hours,
Yeah.
and I mean that in the best way possible. Like he just loves talking ball, and he will talk all day long, and I love it too. And him and I have the tendency to go a little bit longer. But even Peter caps it at 8 questions. You brought us 10 questions because I think you were chomping at the bit. You were ready to go. We're gonna have some tempo here, but you brought 10 questions to the table. So I mean, if this goes like 3 hours, I'm back onto just doing it with Peter and scheduling it in conflict times only for you.
Yeah, so I think this is FOMO kind of compounding to be like, okay, if I'm going to get in this, I'm going to make the most of this opportunity. I'm also the one pounding the pavement for like, we can do 45 minutes. We can absolutely do 40-minute episodes of the Just Baseball show. But you know what? I think we're gonna go well. We've got good pace, and I thought some of them are quick hitters. Like it's kind of the same question for two different teams, 9 and 10. I kind of viewed that as the same question spread into two different ones. It's about trade deadline strategy. So I figure like we can call it 8.5, 9 questions that we're doing here.
Yeah, I think so, and we'll have a good tempo to it. And I'm kind of in the middle. I'm more of like I'll happily go hour 15 and not really realize it. But once you get to like that hour 20 mark, it's like okay, my back's starting to tighten up on me. I
Yeah.
don't really want to talk that much anymore. I drank all my water. And usually at that point I got to pee too, and
Mhm.
it starts to become a little bit of a grind. But speaking of that, we should probably get right into it. And we got questions all over. I mean, we've got a little bit of everything, and of course,
Yeah.
this episode is brought to you by BetMGM as always, and you can use our promo code Just Baseball to get that no sweat bet. You put your bet down, you lose, you get that back in bonus bets. You win, you won, and they'll pay you out. Congratulations, nothing to lose there when you sign up. Everything from prospects getting called up, and I'm excited to talk about that right off the top too. Joe Adell's just finally having it click for him so far this season. Teams, what should they do? Tigers, Blue Jays, and then Chris Sale, a little bit of that too. So let's jump right into the prospect conversation, Jack. And this first question comes from Instagram. It's Bailey on Instagram, Baylee, who wants to know which prospects are we hoping to see get called up? Is it time for Junior? Is Holiday coming back up? I'm glad that both those names were mentioned
Yes.
because I think we get into a habit of kind of conflating a lot of these AAA guys who are performing, or just who are top prospects, and say, call them all up, call this guy up, call that guy up, because service time manipulation in Major League Baseball has made fans jaded, and understandably so, they should be. But we also have to look at it, case by case. And in the case of, and I know you're going to agree with me on this one, Jack, because we talk about it all the time on the call up, but in the case of Jackson Holiday, we'll get to that in a moment. That's a little bit more unique. Let's
Yeah.
start with Caminero. He should have been up yesterday.
Mhm.
And every day that he is not up, the Rays are intentionally putting themselves at a disadvantage. I don't know if Caminero comes up and immediately matches. I think he is one of those guys that will, or at least will have those ebbs and flows where he's going to help you win ball games. But the way I look at it is from now to the rest of the season, if you have Harold Ramirez going or Junior Caminero, you can give that roster spot to one guy. Junior Caminero gives you a better chance to make the playoffs by the end of the season based on what he's going to do. And it's not just the offensive side. It's also the fact that he doesn't clog the DH spot as much. He's even getting reps at second base now. You can plug him in at third. He can play first if you wanted to get him reps there. He's not going to be excellent at any spot, but he's going to be fine. Whereas Harold Ramirez, you pretty much, it's outfield and you hold your breath. Junior should be there again yesterday. And I know you agree with that.
You know what I think they could be worried about? And again, like I don't want to insinuate anything, but if Junior came up like right now, still think he's got a decent shot of winning that Rookie of the Year award in the American League. The National League is absolutely loaded. If the Rays were in the National League, I love that hypothetical. It's stupid because the Rays are in the American League. But if the Rays were in the situation that the NL Rookie of the Year race is in, I think Junior's up right now
Yep.
because Imanaga, Yamamoto, Jared Jones, I mean, shit, dude, Skeens is entering the conversation at this point. Like that rookie class is loaded. But
Mhm.
Langford was underperforming before he got hurt. Holiday, when he came up, really underperforming, and he's going to need more time down there. And I know we're going to elaborate on that in a moment here. I think they're worried that like Junior might actually accrue that full year of service at this point because he might win the award, which is a really crappy reason to keep him down. But I look at Yordan Alvarez. What was it, 19 that he won Rookie of the Year? I mean, that guy, he only played about 90 games to win Rookie of the Year. And, like, I don't think it's crazy to say that Junior Caminero could go on a Yordan type run in 19 where all of a sudden he's got 25 homers at year's end. And we're talking about a depleted rookie class and he wins Rookie of the Year.
And for further context on that, because I totally agree. So with the prospect promotion incentive, which is a phenomenal rule that, and that they added, not even rule, just I guess aspect to the CBA that first of all, they don't really have written out anywhere. It's kind of just hearsay. Like we just have the bullet points of it. You can't really find the detailed explanation of every single aspect of it, but the entire incentive of it is exactly what it sounds like. If you have your prospect, up at a certain point, a certain cutoff date, of course, or opening day, you will reap the rewards of a draft pick if they finish in the top two, or if they place in, if they're a finalist for Rookie of the Year. That's great. So if you have a really good prospect, we saw with the Mariners, that worked out really well for them. They got that compensation pick because J-Rod won Rookie of the Year, and they used that, to be able to load up. They had multiple compensation picks, and they got 3 first-round picks essentially last year, and they loaded up their farm system with that, which is exactly why teams should be doing this. But if you wait past the prospect promotion incentive deadline, and then you call up your player later, if they win or are a finalist in Rookie of the Year, they accrue a full year of service time. So they wanted to make it beneficial for the player too. So if
Yes.
you're called up on opening day, you make the team, you break camp, the team gets a pick if you win Rookie of the Year, and you gain a full year of service time, even if you get called up maybe a couple weeks later. That's beneficial. But the flip side is if you don't get called up in that prospect performance incentive or prospect promotion incentive deadline, and the team doesn't end up getting a pick for you, why would they want to call you up and give you a chance to win Rookie of the Year? Because then they just lose on both ends.
Yeah.
They don't get the pick, and you get the full year of service time, so they get hurt in that regard too. So that's the double-edged sword aspect of this. Ultimately, I think the rule still incentivizes teams to call guys up more often than not, and to have them on the opening day roster more often than not. But it does create this little gray area here where if you didn't call them up in time for the prospect promotion incentive, there's no reason to call him up right after, because if he goes crazy and catches up to everybody else, then you just lost some service time that you were probably manipulating in the first place. So that's the tough part here. And
Yeah.
with Caminero, I agree, it's wide open, and if you bring him up now, he can easily close that gap.
That's
And I do think that that's part of the reason why the Rays don't want to do it.
100%. There are 4 guys right now with odds shorter than plus 1,000 on BetMGM. And it's Colton Cowser, who's the leader in the clubhouse right now at plus 120, Evan Carter, Wilyer Abreu, and Luis Heel. Dude, like, that's not murderer's row there of Rookie of the Year candidates. And Junior Caminero, I think at this point, is 8th or tied for 7th in Rookie of the Year
And
odds right now.
he's got to be the only guy in that 7 that hasn't played a big league game this year yet, right?
Yeah, no, that's it. Wenzel
Yeah.
Perez has slightly shorter odds than Junior Caminero at this point.
That's all you got to know.
Yep.
So the Rays are looking at that. And I know I kind of explained it in a confusing way, but essentially, But when's the prospect promotion deadline?
So it's a full year. It was, I think, like April 20th ish this year.
Yeah.
There are 187 days in a service or in like an MLB year by service time. There are 187 days there. I think it's like if you accrue 165 days on an MLB roster, that is a year of
You
service.
get the full year of service.
You get the full year. So like
And
that was, and that's been in place before this last CBA. So like Chris Bryant was held down until the end of April because you passed that time where you can accrue the full year of major league service. I think it's like you have to spend all but about 20 days on the major league roster to get that full year out of the 187.
and so now that putting that into the CBA, they prospects were and players, the PA was hoping that, hey, this will make teams more willing to say, hey, let's bring this guy up before and let's not make because it was an automatic thing a lot of the time. It was pretty much automatic where it's like, why would I bring him up? Might as well wait a few weeks and then have that extra year of service, as you mentioned.
And you
with
could
Chris
say that it's
Bryant.
bad, but like, dude, it doesn't make sense to do it. Like, if any of us were sitting in a front office position, if we were sitting
Trying to
in
keep
that
your
lead
job.
decision, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, why would I not get 7 years of Junior Caminero? Like, what would you rather have,
Yeah.
6 or 7? I'd rather
Yeah.
have 7.
Especially when, like the players get over it after a few weeks and then you move on from there. And a lot of times you can somewhat justify it a little bit. Chris Bryant became such a big story because there was almost no way you could justify it at all. And it just was so absolutely blatant. But I think in this instance, that's where it makes it a bit of a double-edged sword, though, because then if you don't bring him up by that deadline, as you mentioned, there's no reason to bring him up a week after, 2 weeks after, 3 weeks after, unless you're in an absolute pinch and you're a contender. You might as well wait a month or two. And that's where we're at with Caminero right now. And I think they'll probably wait a little bit longer until they feel like the season's starting to get away from them or they feel like Caminero can't make up the ground. But the way I'd look at it if I'm the Rays, shit, man, if he wins Rookie of the Year, that means you probably got a good chance of making the playoffs because
Probably in.
you figure your other bats are going to start to come alive, and that means Caminero's swinging it like an all-star. And let that be the worst of your problems, damn it. Like, let that be your issue, that the guy that you brought up because some of your hitters aren't performing, and a rookie is now one of your best hitters. Let that be the problem. I would love for that to be the problem. And I think the Rays will hit a point sooner rather than later where that might be a welcomed problem to have. Shane Baz throwing in AAA, they have more pitching reinforcements, but Eflin just hit the IL.
I think Springs is about to start a rehab.
Holy crap. Good.
I know.
Thank goodness. That's exciting. So I think they see it through that lens and they're like, oh, the pitching will keep us strong. But come on, man. I mean, again, if he wins Rookie of the Year, let that be the worst of your issues in Tampa. Caminero, though, doesn't really have anything else left to prove. Last thing I'll mention, though, they are giving him reps at second base, which I think is an important wrinkle because the way that they like to mix and match the infield and the outfield, second base is where Caminero clearly could slide in. Isaac Paredes is going to play third, and that's it. They like to rotate the DH spot, so they don't want to clog that. Caminero would play mostly, I think, out of the DH role, and then maybe occasional days where Paredes does get a day off and DH, that's where you'd start Caminero at third. But if you got Caminero up there and his service time's ticking, he's got to be playing almost every day. So now they're getting him reps at second base in AAA, and I think that is indicative of what might be coming soon because of the ability to mix and match there. They can put Rosario in the outfield, which they've liked to do. Yep. And then, certain lefties that they don't like facing lefties will get out of the lineup like a Josh Lowe or some of the other options at Palacios, and you plug Caminero at second base. So that seems to be the way that it fits in.
And if they ran out Curtis Mead at second base, they're going to be fine running out Junior Caminero at second base.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Real quick on Holiday. I know you've been keeping tabs with him pretty closely too. Yeah. I have as well. They want him to gain confidence again in Baltimore. I think, or not in Baltimore, but I think the Baltimore Orioles want him to gain confidence, work through some things, figure out why he's whiffing to the degree that he is. And it's not egregious, but again, we're talking about a guy that, was seen as one of the better hit tool guys and, consensus plus hit tool, a lot more giving out 70s on him as well. I think there's just some things he needs to work on, some things that he needs to build on. And I don't know if there's as much urgency because they don't need him really nearly as badly up there, especially with some of the other bats that they have at this moment. He's been swinging it well. I think things have looked pretty good, but he's also been striking out still a little bit too much. It's been better of late, but you had a trio of games where he struck out, twice, like 3 in a row. He struck out twice. then the other day struck out twice again. So you just want to see that start to cut down a little bit more. And I don't see much reason to rush him back into it because you get up there for a second stint and struggle, then the optics are a little shaky and the confidence, I think, really starts to take a hit at that point.
100%. And then it turns into a Pete Crow Armstrong situation where it's like, okay, PCA just got optioned down to AAA. Like, where are the Cubs at with Pete Crow Armstrong now? Because you've given him 2 chances and he hasn't really lit the world on fire in either chance. Granted, chance number 1 was very, very limited at the end of 2023. But Holiday, before he went up, pre-debut, 10 games, hit 310 with a 973 OPS. Post-option, 17 games, hitting 234 with a 785 OPS. So the OPS has dropped 200 points. Now, that is going to account for the ripple effect that a brutal stretch in Major League Baseball accounts for, because this guy's coming down with confidence that is not shattered, but like is certainly diminished than when he broke camp with Norfolk. I think you have to give this guy until the All-Star break in Norfolk.
Yep.
I think you need to let him see 2 months of very quality baseball in AAA before you get the 20-year-old back up. One more name before we move on. James Wood should be in the major leagues right now.
Yeah.
Washington
he just homered
Nationals
again today,
outfielder.
by the way.
I mean, I'll run you through like what he's doing right now. 43 games with AAA Rochester. He's slashing 348, 456, 571. That's a 1027 OPS with 12 doubles, 8 homers, 33 walks, and 37 punchouts in 43 games, and he swiped 10 bags too. He is the best player in AAA right now by far, and you have to get him up if you're Washington.
And he ain't winning Rookie of the Year. I mean, he would have to actually have one of the best rookie debuts like of all time with the way that all these arms are thrown in the National League. So I'm with you. And Holiday, I also think he might be working on some things, finding some feels, making some adjustments in the box, and like it's good to just do that in a controlled environment and gain that comfort there. So I'm with you. Wood, it's ridiculous. I keep just tweeting nothing left to prove every single time he homers. I'm just going to continue to do that because he's even doing it against lefties of late. Question number 2. If you could pick an AL and NL MVP for only for sub 500 teams, who would they be? That comes from Matt Flakes 10 on Instagram. Not a ton of options in the National League, some more options in the American League. Jack, who do you have in mind?
I actually think there's clear-cut options in both, and I don't think there are many options. And it was kind of weird. I was looking at the standings. I was like, all the sub 500 teams are playing pretty bad baseball right now. There are very few teams where I'm like, wow, I'm shocked you're sub 500. And I feel like that's the case every year where we've got 1 or 2 where it's like, you're better than a sub 500 team, especially a quarter of the way in. But now I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like, you're kind of a bad team right now. National League, Ellie De La Cruz is the clear-cut answer. Cincinnati, well under 500, but Ellie's got 30 bags at this point. Do you think he swipes 100 this year?
I do. I think with the way that he's starting to get on base at a higher clip and how badly that they need to manufacture runs right now, I absolutely do think he does.
He's playing out of his mind right now. 132 WRC plus, and again, nearly a 2 WAR. I don't know. National League, there really aren't many people that come to mind. American League, Kyle Tucker's tied for the major league lead in WAR with Shohei Ohtani. He's one of 2 3.1 win players at this point. Kyle Tucker is the answer. I will say, if you want to reach onto the hill, Tarek Skubal should be considered as well.
Yeah. I mean, what he's doing right now and how early it is and just the pure dominance on the bump. I think that's a great one as well. Tucker, it's like the team is good, so it's weird picking him, but at the same time, like the question was under 500. They're under 500. They're playing much better ball of late, and Tucker's a big reason for that. But I mean, that guy might be the MVP period. And I think the only reason why he's not the favorite right now is because of Gunnar and what Gunner's doing. But I think when you look at what Kyle Tucker is doing from a statistical standpoint, I think you can make the case that it's been more impressive than Gunnar thus far. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair.
And like I hate to, like I don't want to use that as like a knock on Gunnar, who's again been one of the most incredible players in the sport this year. But you know he's the American League MVP favorite right now by BetMGM because of the fact that he's playing for a team that has a good chance to win the pennant, whereas The Astros have been one of baseball's most disappointing teams out of the gate, but the guy's walking more than he's striking out. He's got 15 homers, already stole 9 bags. He's playing good defense as always. And I mean, it's just really hard to poke a hole in Kyle Tucker's game. Does anyone else come to mind for you
One more
on
shot.
the
Yeah. On the National League side, one more name comes to mind for me, Ketel Marte in Arizona. And again, Arizona is better than a sub 500 team, but as we talk right now, they're under 500, and Ketel Marte is a two-win player at this point, and he's hitting the crap out of the ball. And I know that a lot's been made about his hitting streak and how he's hitting like 260 in the hitting streak. Oh, he's only getting one hit a day. He's got a hitting streak. Guess what? He's got a hitting streak and he's slugging and he's a two-win player. So, yeah, Ketel Marte and Ellie in the National League, and then Kyle Tucker and Tarek Skubal in the American League.
trying to think if we're missing like anybody else, but it's pretty hard to find someone else that I think kind of fits that description. I mean, of course, you could always go the Altuve route, but again, on the same team, Tucker's been more impressive.
Yeah.
And then you look across, the rest of the league again. The bad teams are really bad, so it's just really hard to find someone that kind of fits that description. I wanted to like jokingly say Danny Jansen with the Jays. I just want to highlight that real quick though. Jansen's been unreal.
He's been balling.
He has been awesome, but I mean, just not a guy that is going to fit that description of like below 500 MVP at this point because he's just not making that level of an impact as like some of the other guys are. But man, it's been fun to watch Danny Jansen swing it.
So can I ask you what you think he gets in free agency? He's a free agent at this year's end.
He's getting himself paid. I love watching some of these guys just absolutely lock in on these contract years, but I also think some things have just clicked for him. I mean, catchers always get less, and I think that's something that we kind of forget sometimes and like overshoot it, but he's only 29.
I know.
And the other thing that's really interesting to me is that you're not going to have. I know he's starting to catch a lot more now, but you think he might have a little bit less tread on his tires with the Kirk situation than maybe some other catchers who are coming off of career years. But I mean, what's crazy is we're looking at, and I'd always be a little bit afraid to buy on a catcher off a career year, but at the same time, you got to feel pretty confident. You're getting a guy that's had a WRC plus around 107 for his career, and if he finishes the year the way that he's playing or anywhere near it, it'll be closer to 110 by the time, or 112 by the time the year's over. He's always been a solid defender, and you got to feel pretty good about the floor. But if he finishes the year mashing the way that he is mashing, I don't even know. Like, what's the most recent example of a catcher who has been solid, but then has this incredible year on the walk year
There's
and
no
is
example.
at like 29 years old?
I think there's no recent example of this, to be honest. Like, we haven't seen this good of a backup catcher in a while. And for some reason, like, we still have this timeshare going when it's very clear that Ross Atkins traded the wrong guy. Danny Jansen, since the start of 2021, has an 830 OPS. There's not another example of a backup catcher with an 830 OPS.
He's just because he's not a backup. Like it's
Not a
it's
back,
just one
he's
of
a
those things.
starter masquerading as a backup.
Yep. And he's better than the starter. So, and it's not even reactionary now. I think you look at what you've gotten from Kirk over the last 2 years, and you look at what you've gotten from Jansen now, dating all the way back to the beginning of the 2022 season. And to me, I don't think it's close. I think I think you're becoming a little bit crazy to just continue to wait for Kirk to recapture what he did right out of the gate, instead of ignoring the larger sample of him not being that guy. I think at that point, and that's not to say that Kirk is not a fine catcher, but I think they're almost holding on to what we saw out of the gate versus what we've seen more recently and over, I think, a larger sample.
Yes.
Moving on to the next question, which is another fun one as well. Are there any MLB players that you consider untouchable trade-wise? That comes from Big Nate 2144 on Twitter. There's a bunch, to be frank. Like, so there's a bunch. So I think we narrow it down to what, 5 of the most untradeable players?
So I actually kind of viewed this as like, I wanted to define what an untouchable player is in my mind. You know what I mean? Like, you know how a lot of people have different definitions of star
Yeah.
and superstar?
Yeah.
I want to define what untouchable means. And
I like that. That. Let's hear
like,
your definition, and then I'll fill in any gaps that I feel like are my personal preference of what makes a player, untouchable.
so my criteria, honestly, is jersey sales. as crazy as that sounds. Like, I know, and listen, you laugh, but hear me out on this. Ellie De La Cruz is selling so many Reds jerseys right now. It's unbelievable. He's untouchable. Why would you move this guy leading in jersey sales? Otani, Betts, they're selling jerseys, man. They are the cash cows for the LA Dodgers. Yordan Alvarez, a cash cow for the Houston Astros. I'm even thinking of a Paul Skeens right now in Pittsburgh. He is a cash cow. Do you know how many eyes are on the Pittsburgh Pirates because of Paul Skeens every time he
Oh my
throws?
gosh.
He's
Yeah.
untouchable. Like
Did we
that's my
get
thing.
did we get the
It's
television ratings by the way on that Skeens debut? Like was that the most watched Pirates game since when? Like I'm
I
so
didn't
curious.
I didn't see anything. I'm sure it was, and it might have broken a record. I'm not
Had
sure.
to.
It was every time he throws, it's the free game of the day. So my thing is, if people are showing up to the ballpark and they're turning on the TV for you exclusively, you are an untouchable player. Ellie De La Cruz, I do that for. Paul
Mhm.
Skeens, I'm doing that for right now. Gunnar Henderson, I'm doing that for. Bobby Witt Jr., I'm doing that for. Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts. Like the list goes on beyond that, but those are some of the names that jump to my mind right now.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an important criteria, especially for the big market teams. Where my mind kind of went was control. If I have a guy that's already an established star with 4+ years of control, there's no world where it makes sense to trade them. If it's three or less, you can look in the mirror and say, where are we at as a franchise? And you can talk yourself into doing it, right? Even if you look at the Juan Soto trade. Hey, we're not going to be able to extend this guy. Uh, I think they should have found a way to, but we're not going to be able to extend this guy. Is what it is. Let's cash in. But I think if you have more than 4 years or more of control, any franchise that looks at that situation and says we can't get competitive within 4 years is a joke to me.
Yeah.
Like you should not feel as though you cannot turn things around no matter how ugly it is within 4 years. So if you have a superstar player and he has 4+ years of control, or a guy that's budding, a budding superstar, there's no reason to move that guy. To me, there is legitimately the package that you're going to get when he has 2 years of control and is a more established star is not going to be much different than the package you get for 4 years of control. Look at what the Juan Soto trade brought in, for the Washington Nationals, and that wasn't with 4 years of control. So for me, it's the 4+ years of control that make a player untradeable for me, because again, you should be able to make things better by that time. And if you are realizing, hey, this rebuild is not going the way that we expected, you look at like the White Sox, for example, right? Didn't go the way we expected. You still have 2 years of control to work with at that point, where you can then cash in and still get pretty much the same haul. Like, there's a certain point in which you're just not going to be able to get more than what you're probably going to bring in a Soto deal. Like who's ever going to command more than that? I just don't really see it. So for me, it's a guy that's on the brink of stardom or a superstar with 4+ years of control. Because again, there's no excuse for saying we're not going to be competitive within 4 years. I mean,
Yeah.
that's crazy. You could have multiple GMs in that span. I mean, we've seen multiple organizations have multiple GMs and presidents of baseball operations and turnover across that span.
So
So that's kind of where I see it.
So I can run us through like rapid fire divisions, just, throw it out there. And I'm going to like exclude some guys that I don't think fit the top of the line jersey sale superstar criteria. So like I start in the National League East, the Phillies, like obviously Trey Turner, obviously Aaron Nola, but like Bryce Harper and Zach Wheeler are the two untouchable pieces for the Philadelphia Phillies.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
frankly see it
And,
like
and,
that.
and team situation, of course,
For
makes a
sure.
big difference too. Because like if you have Harper on, or excuse me, you have like Zach Wheeler on a bad team at this point, given his age, you could make the case to trade him, no matter how many years of control you have contractually, especially since it's not pre-arb or anything like that. But anyway, continue.
For sure. Atlanta, I view Acuna, Riley, Olson, Strider as the four untouchables there.
In their situation, yes, I think a couple of those guys, especially like Olson, I love him. He's off to a slow start, but like different situation, you could justify it.
For sure. I did I tell you about the weird like blog article. I Googled Austin Riley because he's dealing with like an oblique thing right now. I just
Mm-hmm.
Googled Austin Riley and the first article that popped up on Google News was, does it make sense for Atlanta to trade Austin Riley? No. No, never, never, never. Stop
No,
writing that.
stop.
So those are the four untouchables, I think. Yuri Perez, I don't think is untouchable. Like that definition based on the Marlins
So
team situation.
yeah, I just look at it. What you got 5 more years of
Yeah.
control when he comes back. To
Yeah.
me, he's untouchable for another year. And I know he's out, but like, let's even when he's on the mound, let him just go out there and throw. What's the point of moving him now? And if you catch fire, something clicks, you're really fortunate that you find some diamonds in the rough and you expedite this rebuild. Then you're going to be really happy that you had Yuri Price. So to me, he's untouchable because it's 4+ years, more than 4 years, and he's a star.
Yeah. Lindor is a weird one. Like, I guess untouchable because he's, so much money and all that. I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, untouchable. Milwaukee, William Contreras is approaching untouchable for
Hmm.
me.
No, I think he full-fledged is untouchable with the fact that you have the years of control and he's established as one of the best catchers in the sport.
Yeah.
To me, untouchable.
Yeah. Cubs. I don't know if the Cubs have anybody that's untouchable. I don't think they do.
That's wild because they're a good team.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, I mean, like technically speaking, you'd like to think that
Technically.
there's no reason for them to move Imanaga or whatever. But if you got approached and said, some team tells you, hey, yeah, if it would never happen, but in a vacuum, if the Tigers were like, oh, we'll give you Tarek Skubal, like,
Yeah,
and
it's a
some
choice.
larger deal. Again, it makes no sense. It would never happen, but you would do it.
Right.
So by that definition, not untouchable.
Yeah.
So no, that's weird. The Cubs talented might be the most talented team without an untouchable guy.
Yeah. Pirates, I think Skeens, maybe Jones at this point.
Yeah, I was thinking like Jones, Skeens for sure. Jones, I freaking love. Is there a player in Major League Baseball? I think there's a few players in Major League Baseball that you're trading Jones
I
for.
think so. So yeah, Skeens
So
at this point. Like
yeah,
just
yeah,
based on jersey sales again. Cardinals, nobody. Reds, Ellie De La Cruz. Um,
yeah.
NL West, Dodgers, I mean, Betts
And I think
Otani.
that's the other criteria, by the way, of untouchable is like, is there somebody in this league that you would trade them for?
Yeah.
And it can't be just another guy similar age with a ton of control because that kind of defeats the purpose. It's like the Spider-Man meme. But yeah, Dodgers, it's interesting because they're all older guys, but
Yeah.
you could make the case that they're all untouchable.
Betts, Otani, Freeman, I think are the clear cut untouched. I mean, Kershaw just based on precedent or like, his credentials and all that. Padres, Tatis.
Tatis. But even with Tatis, like that contract's good, but is he untouchable? Jersey sales is your criteria there,
Yeah.
obviously hits home, but I don't know. There's quite a few guys I'd move Tatis for.
Yeah, I don't know. He's just like he was signed to be the identity of the Padres, and he's still
That's
what,
the problem.
26 years old, 25 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very favorable for them still. And they're not going to they'd have to get multiple controllable cheap pieces because of where they're at as a franchise. And it's such a pipe dream. It's so unrealistic that he's basically untouchable.
Right. Giants, nobody. Logan Webb, like there are pitchers that I'm moving Logan Webb for. D-backs, Carroll. Yeah,
Yeah.
Carroll.
More on
Rockies.
that coming. I'm
Yeah.
already started that piece on
Um,
what's wrong with Corbin Carroll.
Rockies, Elihuris Montero and Brenton Doyle are the two untouchables there, I think.
Oh, I can't believe
Um,
I'm still watching Montero go.
it's
I can't
crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Yankees, Judge, and Cole. Those two I'm not moving.
Yeah, I mean, just because of their situation. Obviously, there's, if you were offered Gunnar Henderson for Garrett Cole, you're doing it. But again, it's just not realistic. In any realistic scenario, they're untouchable.
Yeah. Orioles, Gunner, Adley. I
Yeah,
think those are the two. Tampa, there are guys I'm moving McClanahan for. Like that's the only name that I think could
because of the
maybe,
injuries. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But I think that's the only one because he is, borderline best pitcher in baseball when he's healthy.
Hmm.
Red Sox, Devers at this point, dude. Holy shit, man. 6 straight games with a homer for Rafi Devers. Went backside again for number 6 in Tampa. He's a freak of all freaks. Um,
He rakes.
yeah, Toronto, nobody. Cleveland, nobody at this point. Kansas City, Bobby Witt Jr., Minnesota, nobody. Detroit, Scooble.
Is he though? Like, given where they're at, and we're going to talk about that later. I think you could make the case that you could move him, especially with their pitching depth. I wouldn't, but I don't know if he's untouchable. Also with Devers, like he was the one guy that they really needed to keep him to save face optically. That was a big part of it too. And he's going to be making what, like 29 million basically, or like 30 million
The
AAV
next like 10
until
years.
2033. Like
Yeah.
that's, you're not beating that.
No, not beating it at all. Yeah, I guess, but like Schoolboy, I think is approaching top five pitcher in baseball, and like that's kind of crazy with the control that he's got
Yes.
left.
Yeah, that's true.
White Sox, nobody. Robert could absolutely be on the move this year.
He should
Uh,
be to be.
he should be. Seattle, Julio, Texas. You know what? Is George Kirby untouchable? I don't think so.
He's darn close. He's darn
I
close, but
I
given the
don't think
pitching
he's
that
there.
they have, I don't think he's totally untouchable
Yeah.
because it just, I think there's a world where you could make some mega insane blockbuster and you might not be able to turn it down with the Mariners offense being so putrid.
Yeah. Texas, Seager, Houston,
Langford, not yet.
uh,
Not yet.
not
Not
yet.
yet. Not yet.
Houston, Jordan, um,
Tucker, because of the contract situation, is not untouchable,
is
unfortunately.
not untouchable. I
It's a
think
walk here.
Jordan is the only one at this point. Angels, nobody. A's,
Altuve too, because of his contract. He literally took less money because he doesn't care about negotiating because he's just happy.
yeah,
So
and the
like
credentials.
at that contract, like I'm not moving Altuve for almost anything. But again, there could be a world where maybe you could justify it.
Yeah. So that's it, man.
Yeah, it's not. It sounds like a lot of players, but it's also not a lot because even those names, like again, there could be a weird parallel universe or just bizarro situation where a young player is being offered for those guys that's established, which again doesn't make any sense. But basically, it would only have to be untradeable for untradeable. So it's a weird one. But the point being, there's a lot of players I think that teams would not move, and almost every, but more teams than not have players that are just not going to even be welcomed into conversations and trade discussions at all.
Right.
And I think that's, I mean, we had a little bit of the rumblings of like the Marlins and Royals, like briefly talking about Yuri for Bobby Witt Jr. I think, well, now it's a no-brainer, obviously, that you'd take Bobby Witt Jr. But at a certain point, I think it was one of those classic ones where like just both teams just are like, nah, we can't do it, can't risk it. Just not going to do that.
Right.
And I think that's where it would be with a lot of these guys. All right, this is another good one because I love shining light on underrated relievers. Who are the most underrated relievers that no one is talking about? That comes from Hagen Snell 5 on Instagram. I have a couple names. We can go rapid fire. Who do you got, Jack?
Justin Slayton in Boston and Matt
Yes.
Strahm in Philly at this point. Strahm is buried when you think about all of the bigger ticket names in Philly at this point. Also, shout out Reed Garrett in New York, but Justin Slayton, Rule 5 pick. He was in the Rangers system, taken by the Red Sox, and Slayton is balling out. Multi-inning reliever. He's disgusting.
My favorite Rule 5 picked it. I still can't believe that guy was available in it. And I mean, the Red Sox continue to prove that it's different times there pitching wise. And Slayton's been awesome for them. I have a note here. I had Strom as well, by the way. Crazy to just see him turn into this kind of reliever for the Phillies, just nuts. Who the hell is Brian Hudson?
Is he he's big boy, right? In Milwaukee?
Yes. But like every once in a while, there's a disgusting reliever who I've legitimately never heard of. And I think Brian Hudson, maybe it's a indictment on me. When you're a reliever and the Dodgers kind of let you go and then it clicks for you somewhere else, it's pretty rare. And that's exactly what happened with Brian Hudson. I don't know anything on this guy, and he has been unreal for the Brewers, who continue to find really talented relievers of their own. But I mean, this guy, even operating more in the low 90s, has been really good and really efficient and getting tons of whiff from the left side.
So the only reason I know who Brian Hudson is he was the Cubs' third round pick, and he's from the state of Illinois, a year older than us. So like, I remember crossing paths on the travel circuit, and it's like, hey, who's that 6'8" beast over there that's throwing? And it's like, oh, Brian Hudson. But I really didn't look far into him after he struggled out of the gates with the Cubs when he was drafted. I mean, this guy had an ERA over 5 in short season in 2016. 2017, he was okay. He was just an innings eater in the Cubs, like lower minor leagues for a while, then drifted into obscurity. And now he's the latest beneficiary of the Brewers bullpen factory.
Well, and again, when you aren't the beneficiary of the Dodgers bullpen factory, where he had a 7.27 ERA in 6 appearances, you think, oh man, well, my luck might be running out. This might be it here. But no, 26 and a thirds innings this year with the Brewers, 0.68 ERA, 31 punchies, 7 walks. That's just 2 earned runs and 13 hits in that span. I mean, that's nasty, nasty stuff. And then I wanted to give a shout to a guy that I know you've seen, lefty Tim Herron. I
Uh-huh.
mean, Tim Herron with the Guardians, another factory there pitching wise. Herron, I've liked since he was included in. I don't remember what the trade was exactly, but it was a smaller trade. He went the other way, and I mean, I was looking at the release characteristics. I was looking at what this guy has stuff wise. Another funky lefty with loud stuff, so a little bit different than Holiday. But I mean, disgusting, and he has been awesome so far this season for the Guardians, both in being able to get whiffs, get lefties, he can get righties as well. He can do a little bit of everything.
No trade for Heron. 27-year-old lefty.
Sure.
Yeah,
Who am I
no
mixing him
trade.
up with? Who
Um,
am I
you're not
mixing
thinking
him
of
up with?
Kevin Kelly. Heron and Kelly
I
were
might just
like,
be thinking of Evan Sisk,
oh yeah, Sisk
another
was in the
weird
Michael A.
lefty.
Taylor deal. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Well, regardless, I've seen Heron throw quite a few times. I know you have too on calling games.
it's
And just kind of
weird,
was
man.
waiting for it to come together because it's 6'6". It's weird from the left side. And now it looks like it's really coming together.
I
And
don't know
he's
how.
sitting 95, 96, touching 97 often.
I know, dude. I don't know how to describe what he does. And if you're with us on YouTube, like I'm trying to do it visually, but it's almost like he drops his hand below his glove and then whips around. So you think like, oh, he's 6'6", 230. He's going to be big boy working down on the hill. No, like he uses his length to his advantage there. And it's just like you're saying, just an odd release from him. And shit's working right now. One more shout out before we move on. I'm begging the Washington Nationals to trade Hunter Harvey. I think Harvey's going to close games for a contender. He's sitting 98. He's gross again. He was gross last year. First round pick of Baltimore. It just didn't work out in Baltimore. He goes to the other team in the DMV and is lighting it on fire as the setup guy. And I think everybody's going to go look at Finnegan at the back end of that bullpen. It's like, oh, let's just go get the Nats closer. Go get the Nats setup guy. The setup guy might be better.
He is. I think he is. I'm with you. Harvey's unreal. And he could get them a nice return. I think they have to move him
Yeah.
this year. One other note on Heron, I think what makes him so effective is that cross body delivery when you're 6'6",
Yeah,
and
it's
having it be a slider from there. Opponents are hitting a buck 29 against that slider this year. So, I mean, left on left, forget it. You're toast. Lefties, by the way, this year, 1 for 25 against Tim Herron. You got no chance. It looks like it's coming at your head every time.
that's Andrew Miller levels, man. Like tall lank machine, like destroying lefties. That's Andrew Miller type stuff.
Look out. We'll go to number 5 here, which is Chris Sale. Where does Chris Sale rank on the NL Cy Young leaderboards a quarter of the way through the season? That comes from Ryan Foster on Twitter. I know Ryan has been a long time listener, another great social interaction guy, and I know Braves fan as well. I mean, dude, it's kind of wide open, I feel like, in the National League. Of course, you have Imanaga doing what he's doing. I'm not saying he's gonna hit a wall or anything like that, but I am saying I just think he comes down to earth a bit, especially when we get Wrigley blowing out. I'm still waiting
Yeah.
on it though, and it's not happening. And I love Imanaga, but it just seems like you can't run away with this thing, right? Like I feel like it's going to start to get a little bit closer, but we'll see. That said, I think Sale's right in the conversation with the way he's throwing because I mean the strikeouts too. It's been vintage Sale.
He's in the wrong league right now. Like Scooble, it seems like is running away with the AL Cy Young right now. I think Corbin Burns is the only guy within earshot, but after that, it falls off. The NL Cy Young race is loaded right now with Imanaga, with Ranger Suarez, with Zach Wheeler, with Tyler Glasnow. Like those are a lot of guys that Sale's got to fight through. Having said that, worked back-to-back 7 inning outings, I think combined 1 run, and maybe it was back-to-back 7 shutout. Um, I mean, he looks as good as he did in Boston for his best stretch in Boston. And, like he's not putting together the, 12 Ks and 6 shutout innings like he was in Chicago, but, like
Pretty close.
it is. And like it was 7 with 9 punch outs. And then I think the start before that, it was like 7 with 7 punch outs or maybe 5 punch outs. The thing is, like, this is what the mid 30s Chris Sale is going to look like. And dude, Atlanta saw that guy and said, you know what? He's ours. There you go, Vaughn Grissom. Like, enjoy it. But man, what a fucking deal for Alex Anthopoulos.
Something has to have clicked with Sale on like a release or just command standpoint as well, because it's the stuff was diminished slightly, of course, because like any pitcher as they age, it's going to happen. But the stuff was still way too good even last year to not be putting up better numbers. And now you look across the board, his strike rate's up everywhere, and the command has just been superb. He's striking out 32% of hitters. He's walking 3.5%. Slider strike rate 73%. Fastball strike rate 67%. Changeup strike rate 71%. Sinker is 71% as well. Those all combined for a strike rate of 70% across the entire arsenal.
So
That's sustainably great. Like he's as long as he is healthy. For me, the only thing that's going to stop Chris Sale is health, because the stuff is good. It's not prime Sale, but 70% of prime Sale's stuff with command that's as good as ever. That's how you age well in this game, is still a Cy Young contender, as weird as that sounds, because he hasn't won the Cy Young yet. That's just usually how it just lines up. You got to have your best years at the right time. And that's the funky part about awards. But I mean, when to more directly answer the question though, Jack, I think he's 2 right now. Maybe 3, but I think you can't really put him anywhere lower than that in the National League Cy Young conversation at this point.
I at this point I think he's ahead of Glasnow and Wheeler just barely, but we know Glasnow and Wheeler can be sustainable. Well, Glasnow stay on the field, like we'll see. But his stuff is always going to be sustainable. Like 97, 98 with that breaking ball doesn't go cold ever. And Wheeler is as sustainable as they come. I do think Shota and Ranger Suarez are slightly ahead of him right now, but just barely. I think he's right smack dab in the middle of that 5-horse race.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking at Ranger at a 1.37 as well.
Yeah.
3 more innings, or two and a thirds more innings. So I think though Sale, I'm going to buy him doing this a little bit more than, and I love Ranger. We've talked about him a ton. I think he's going to finish the year fantastic. Already 8-0, which is nuts.
Yeah.
But I think Sale ends up kind of separating as long as he stays healthy. Imanaga, though, it's going to be tough to catch, I guess, a 0.84 ERA. I do think there's going to be some natural adjustments that hitters start to try to make as they realize, what makes his fastball so unique. And those high carry guys. What's amazing to me is usually the high carry guys and the elevated fastball guys will run into long ball issues, and Imanaga hasn't at all. Historically, in Japan, he did. And that's the weirdest part of this whole thing. So I'm not rooting for it. I would love to see Imanaga run away with it. But just from like an objective standpoint, because I have no horse in this race, does that come along at some point? Does he continue to strand runners at a 94% clip? I think part of that is just the feel to pitch and just how talented Imanaga is. But I also think that there will be some, just normalization to a degree. Maybe there will be with Sale too. But when Sale's striking out as many batters as just about any starter that's in this conversation, and the track record that he has there, I think he can close the gap. But I'm with you to answer the question more directly. He's checking in at 3rd.
Yeah.
But man, I think I'd bet on him at 3rd of the group of the 2 guys that are ahead of him. And how about 3 lefties?
Yeah.
In the lead right now in the National League? It's always fun.
Kind of doing it in a different way too, which is like very, very fun. Last thing you mentioned, strike rate on the slider, 73%, on the heater, 67%. You remember our conversation about Tiedemann, Ricky Tiedemann? Like he lands the slider. He's got more confidence in landing the slider than the fastball. That's always been Chris Sale. Like that is the mark of a great, great borderline all-time breaking pitch. And that's what Chris Sale has.
100%. And that's why he's been appointment television.
Yes.
I'm going to put you on the spot because no matter what, we'll be wrong because it's May 22nd. What would your prediction be? It might be none of those 3, but if you had to pick one of Imanaga, Sale, Suarez to win the National League Cy Young, who are you taking?
I would take Sale out of those 3, but I think it's going to be Wheeler this year.
I love it. That's fun. That's a good problem for the Phillies as well. Which of our 2 guys that's not even Aaron Nola is going to win the Cy Young in the National League? It's a pretty good spot to be in. And also, by the way, Christopher Sanchez from a WAR perspective is in the top 10 in the National League too, just edging out Trevor Williams because it's May freaking 22nd.
Correct.
We'll get to question number 6 here. How should the Orioles handle their prospect logjam situation? Who should they target if they were to trade out of their farm? And which prospects should they give real MLB opportunity to? I hope I say this name. I've had great interactions with this person as well on Twitter, but I'm always so bad with reading the at. Klein Schroeder. I actually think I nailed that.
I
Klein
think so.
Schroeder on Twitter.
Yeah.
Great interactions as well. Good question. Topic of the year, I think. Clear. You trade Heston Kjerstad.
Yes.
Get free that man. He's wasting his time in AAA. It's Michael Bush all over again, like
Yeah.
we've said. Connor Norby, free him as well. He's playing left. He's a second baseman. Can play both. That's fine, but like, there's no way he fits in. Those two guys need to go. Joey Ortiz was the guy last year above all that needed to go, and he went. This is a situation where I'd be astounded if both Kjerstad and Norby are there, because you have 40-man implications too. There's about 2020 draftees as well, but you got 40-man implications there that I think also will make things interesting for them. And you might as well get ahead of it and add someone that can help you win the World Series now, than try to figure out the 40-man crunch in the offseason when you want to try to make a free agency move or something like that. Who should they get? Because I know you agree that it should be Kjerstad and Norby. What do you turn that into? We've put Mason Miller mock trades out on the call up. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's an obvious one.
Mm-hmm.
That's an obvious one. Anywhere else you go, or is that just where your mind goes immediately and you don't want to go anywhere else?
I immediately go to Mason Miller, man. I'm not going anywhere else at this point. Like, go get the best reliever in baseball right now and have him throw the eighth or ninth with Felix Bautista next year. And like Yennier Cano turns into a seventh inning guy. That is crazy. And that's an all-time assortment. I look at this farm and I see four guys that I am not moving, no matter the deal. Holiday, Basayo, Mayo, and Enrique Bradfield, just because he's like the recent first round pick. And it just seems like the floor is so stupidly, ridiculously high.
You're not moving him though. If you can go get, I know they don't really need any help in the rotation right now, but if you could go get someone that changes things,
I
you're
guess I
probably
would, but like,
you'd rather not.
I'd rather
You're
not
not itching
because
to move him like some of these other guys were like, please, for the love of God, move him.
yeah. And like his timeline times up perfectly with Cedric Mullins. And like when Mullins is up, you know what I mean? So Mullins out, Bradfield in, like, hey, you have your answer in center field. And he becomes one of the better defensive center fielders in all of baseball. Like, and he is a nightmare, either in the leadoff spot or in the 9 hole. When he gets on base, he's going to be on third. Like, that's who Bradfield is. So, like, I like that dynamic to this Orioles offense that's going to have so much pop, so much bat to ball. They're going to see so many pitches. I think Bradfield can blossom into that best leadoff guy in baseball type player.
Yeah. Or the best 9 hitter the game has like ever
Yeah,
seen in a
exactly.
long time.
So
Yeah.
like that's why I like the idea of keeping Enrique Bradfield, but everybody else I think is fair game. If you want to ID one of the pitchers, McDermott or Povich, just because you think that you need a 6 moving forward, go ahead. And like Chipman, if you're not going to extend Corbin Burns, why not package them for a top flight starting pitcher to pair with Grayson? I think they
Yeah.
should extend Corbin Burns. I think they have their guy there right now, and they should take care of that. But yeah, I think Mason Miller is the clear cut example, or top flight starting pitching. I also think just like straight up Norby for Hunter Harvey can make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're not going to lose sleep over that. And that helps you immediately.
Yeah.
You are going to become one of the more feared bullpens out there. Well, do you know Harvey's contractual situation?
I think he's up after this year, but that feels like an easy extension too. Like, no problem. Hey, sign a 2-year deal after this. And if that's what it takes, Washington to convince him, go right ahead. But I mean, Chipman, like if it's Judd Fabian for Hunter Harvey, like go ahead and do it.
Can we get a little outlandish here for a second?
Mm-hmm.
What would it take to get Luis Robert Jr. to Baltimore?
So my knee-jerk question was going to be, do you think he fits? Of course he fucking fits. Like,
It's like a glove. They need a center fielder. I mean, Mullins is fine. You got a superstar who's extremely affordable that can now play center field, and your lineup is comically gross.
Kirst,
I
Kirstad,
mean, you could put together a mega package there.
Kirstad, Norby, Beavers,
McDermott if you want, Povich if you
McDermott.
want. You could list in that situation. You could easily go with you could part with. I think, of Bradfield then.
Yeah. Here's
Like
your
you
menu,
can put
sir. What
something
would you
together
like?
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like
Literally give them a menu of
dude,
the 10
you're
prospects.
going to the fucking Cheesecake Factory. It's like, hey man, which one of these 130 dining options would you like?
Yep. That's to me is a no brainer there too. And look, if you have to include a Mayo or Basayo, then you probably say no. I could understand why the White Sox would want that, but you can literally give them 7 prospects
Yes.
that would immediately slot right into their probably top 15
It's
with
like
a
the
good
Paul
chance.
George trade. It's like Paul George from from OKC to the Clippers. It's like Shea and a billion picks.
A billion, like
A
somewhere in eighth
billion.
grade, technically still when they would draft him, but it was just endless. It's like, okay, we're set up really well.
Yeah.
So that's another one. But I agree. I think with the pitching where it's at, which is in a really good spot, and Bradish, back and throwing the way he is, and Burns there as well. Cash in. You don't have to deplete the farm that is so strong. Go get just the best reliever on the market that no one's going to be able to compete with your offer. And I think that's where the Orioles go. But it's clearly Kerstad and Norby that need to be on the move there. No reason to force the arms out, even if they don't have a direct path. There's always going to be a need for arms.
Yeah.
What do you make of Joe Adell's recent performance on a struggling Angels team without Trout? That comes from Optimal Sadness on Twitter. If it's Optimal Sadness, I'd imagine that they're probably Angels fans.
Yeah.
Uh, I I mean, we talked a little bit about it in the last couple episodes or a couple episodes ago. He's figured something out for sure. And he's turned himself into, I think, instead of a guy that goes up and down and a quad A player, to a guy that's going to stick and hang out in the big leagues. My question is, how good of a big leaguer is he sustainably? And I think we're still waiting to figure that out. He talked about some of the approach things that he's adjusted, but he's still aggressive. I think you look at the bat to ball; it's continued to get better. The defense has actually gotten better, which is nice. I don't understand why he's not a good base runner, considering how fast he is. But that's for another time. Offensively, clearly, there's things that have clicked across the board.
Yeah.
But he's always going to need to hit because the OBP is not great, and he's going to need to slug. I think he's a really solid player. I don't know if he's ever going to be the guy that was a consensus, top 10 prospect, all that stuff. But I think he's settled in. Like I'm buying that he's an above average big leaguer. I think that is what is clear at this point, that things have started to click for him. And I think you're seeing that from a strikeout perspective for sure.
I thought he was a sitting duck DFA candidate coming into this year, to be honest. Like, and he and Roansy Contreras, I think we were both saying, where did the time go? And look, now they're teammates. Rowansy's in that Angels bullpen because he was DFA to make room for Skeens. Rowansy's 24 years old and he was out of options. Joe Adell's out of options. Like it was very similar to the Nick Gordon conversation, actually, because Nick Gordon was a top 50 prospect in the game, right? At a certain point, he was that first round pick, came with all the credentials, and it just like never really worked out. And he hung around on the Twins roster for way too long because they couldn't option him. I thought Adell was going to be that guy this year, but credit to him for changing the narrative around that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's punching out at a way lower clip than I thought he would at this
Yep.
point. Is that sustainable? Hopefully. Do you feel like there's been tangible changes there? But like my worry is he's just the Angels version of Sam Hilliard. Again, I use that comp all the time. Like every organization has the Sam Hilliard type, and Joe Adell was clearly the Angels Sam Hilliard type. Now
I
I
think he's
hope
better.
he's way more than that.
I think he's more than that. I don't know. Again, I don't know where he settles in. I think he's more of that guy that is, again, a consistent above average regular, because I still think that there's going to be the swing and miss issues. I still think that breaking balls are going to give him some fits. But what's interesting to me is that breaking balls before were just destroying him. And even in AAA at points, and I know he mashed, but that's the PCL. Good pitchers with good breaking balls were giving him trouble in AAA. Like he was not hitting sliders well. Even if you combine the big league stint and his minor league stint last year, he hit 145 against sliders, and it wasn't much better against curveballs for the most part. So I think that's the area where he's really improved to the point where you don't need to be good against breaking balls, just don't be a black hole. And in the big leagues last year, he was 118 against breaking balls. This year, he's 211. But the difference is when he is connecting, he's hitting them hard, and he's elevating hangers. If you crush hangers and crush fastballs, you can make a living. especially when you're a great athlete, you've turned into a solid defender in a corner, you hope that the base running comes along. I think those things are enough for him, especially with the approach getting better. It still needs to improve more, but especially with that happening too, I think we saw like incremental is underselling it, but I think we saw a step forward in like three different departments, which is combined for a leap forward. And
Yeah.
that's why I am kind of buying to a degree the leap forward. I don't think he's an all-star. I think he's a 2 to 3 win player, maybe a little bit more than that, and a guy that could end up being a nice piece for them to hold on to, and that they can look at on this lineup and say, okay, well, he's going to be here for a while and build there forward. I do think that he's somebody that's going to hang around for them now.
Cool.
Question number 8. Are we as a community overrating big strikeout guys like Skeens and Strider due to the fact that they struggle to go deep in games? I know you picked this question. I know why. Sorry, let me start the question over. But as I was reading, I'm like, I know why Jack picked this one. Are we as a community overrating big strikeout guys like Skeens and Strider due to the fact that they struggle to go deep in games because a strikeout tends to be more pitches than a ground ball, for example? That comes from Luke Hope 3 on Twitter. Great question in the respect that strikeouts do require more pitches. And I know it's something that Skeens has talked about. And I think even, I don't know if it was in the interview that you did with him on the call up or just in other conversations as well. I know you're raising your hand. I know you're chomping at the bit. We'll get to Strider in a moment. But what's your thoughts on this, Jack? I know this is right up your freaking alley.
No, and I'm not even going to dip into the Skeens well here. I think the short answer, like very short answer, is no. We're not overrating the strikeout. Answer is no. It's so ridiculously important. Like it is the most important thing for pitching right now. It's how you get paid. It's how you win games. Look at Luis Seal's ERA. Oh, but he walks a bunch of guys. Yankee fans are doing backflips with what Luis Seal is doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, early contact is really important. The best pitchers in baseball marry those two art forms. They get strikeouts when they need them. When the bases are empty and there's one man out in the fifth, they'll roll an 0-1 ground ball to short.
So
that's what makes a Cy Young winner.
Which one's harder to learn, Jack? The strikeouts or the ground balls?
The
What's harder to develop?
The strikeouts are harder to develop, guys. Let's be honest. You can go to one pitch at the knees and it could be a ground ball machine. There are so many guys in bullpens that can do that. And you know what? Ground balls are going to find the holes. Those are the guys that have a bullpen ERA of 4. And it's like, yeah, they're a fine 6th inning option. Like they'll bounce back and forth. The guys that strike out people in bullpens, the strikeout artists, are $100 million closers. Edwin Diaz punched out 17 per 9. He got a $100 million deal. Josh Hader punches out more than like any closer in the game, it seems like. And he got a $95 million deal. And starting pitching wise, why are we obsessed with Spencer Strider? Yeah, he'll get hit for a couple blow-up outings, but he'll also get through 7 and punch out 14, and it sells tickets. And, dude, it kills the ego of the opposing lineup.
Oh, yeah.
Strikeouts kill lineups.
Yes.
Ground balls, it's like, oh, we just didn't find the holes. We got unlucky today. You can still sleep soundly that night if you hit 3 hard ground balls. If you punched out 3 times, yeah, Elder. Like, there's no opposing lineup that is tossing and turning after Elder goes 6 against him. Because it's like, oh, you know, I barreled some balls up.
Actually, to push back on that, they are because they feel like they should be hitting it. Yeah. And you know, when he's locating, he gives you great starts.
Yeah.
But he has to locate. And that is so hard to consistently do. And yeah, I was actually looking at that recently where like I feel like when you get shut down by Elder, you're so pissed because you see one pitch, you ground out, and you go back to the other. That's great. You know, it's good to have that guy as a 4 or 5 starter, but you're also seeing the good and the bad with that. We see Elder dominate, and then we see him get racked, and it was tough watching him get racked on his birthday on Sunday Night Baseball. But I mean, that's what comes with the territory. I do think it's a good question though, because something that I do look for if we're talking about premier arms and what makes Skeens so special is that Skeens can get the whiff whenever he wants. Yep. But now with the splinker and the pitchability that he has, he's talked about, I want to be able to get ground balls early in ABs too. So I do think it's a separator for the elite of the elite, But at the same time, if you're Spencer Strider and you're putting up whiff numbers we've really never seen before, then it doesn't matter. You're never going to overrate a guy that's in the first percentile of strikeouts. But I will take the guy that gets some more ground balls and is in the 30th percentile of strikeouts than the guy that gets no ground balls and is in the 10th percentile, and I'm saying top 10%
Yeah,
of
kind of.
strikeouts.
Yeah.
So like that's where the nuance I think is applied. But at the top, screw nuance with when it
Dude,
comes to that stuff.
that's the other thing. Like you look at all the aces in Major League Baseball, the thing that jumps out about them is they're willing to work deep because they have both tools in their toolbox. Like Garrett Cole can throw 200 innings, but he can also flirt with 300 strikeouts. Jacob deGrom, if he ever stayed healthy, could flirt with 200 innings. He could also flirt with 300 strikeouts. It's why we fell in love with Max Scherzer. Hell, it's
Zach
why we
Wheeler.
fell in love with Sale. It's why we love Wheeler now. Like, I'm totally with you, man. And like, that's the thing. The best pitchers in baseball can do both, but the harder one to develop and the more valuable one is the swing and miss.
I'll say to validate that question a little bit, I do think that the guys that do both pretty well get underrated because
Yes.
they don't do the off the charts. Like Framber, when he's clicking, it's not 20, it's not off the charts case, but he does get a good amount of swing and miss and he gets a lot of ground balls. And it's like, that's about you, Luis Castillo, another
Luis
guy. Like
Castillo,
nothing
Logan
jumps
Webb.
off the page, but he
Yeah.
does both.
Yeah.
Those are the guys that like if you query ground ball rate above 6 or 50% and strikeout rate, above 8 per 9, you're gonna get nothing but really good pitchers.
Really
And
good.
that's below average strikeout numbers. If you put it for over 9, you're gonna get some of the best, but guys that usually tend to be a little bit underrated.
Yeah.
Couple more real quick. And by the way, when Peter does listen to this, he's gonna be like, "Ha ha, you guys end up going an hour 30 anyways."
No,
So
we're at an hour 6 right now. We're
hour
good.
6, okay.
Yeah, we're okay.
No, but again, I'm telling you, it's hard. It's
It's hard.
really hard to keep these under. And it's tough. Because again, there's usually some great questions, and I always want to make sure we answer them in detail. So 9 and 10, we will answer in detail here. What should the Tigers do at the trade deadline? Nice and simple. That comes from Seth_Hensley7 on Instagram. That is an open-ended, fun, and I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with that question. I'll kick it to you. We didn't talk about this before. What do you think the Tigers should do, Jack?
I think they should hunt Michael Lorenzen adjacent deals this offseason. And they made a 1-for-1 swap with the Phillies last year. Lorenzen, who is their all-star representative, for Hao-Yu Lee. And Lee is not a top 10 prospect in their system, but Hao-Yu Lee is a guy that like had decent prospect pedigree with the Phillies. Like they moved for a mid-level prospect. Mid-level prospects are not going to come up and be major league stars, but he could be a package in another trade down the line. He could come up and give them a sneaky 2.5 win season when they need it. I think that they have a really good bedrock to build around here, not including Spencer Torkelson, unfortunately. And like, I don't think you trade Torque. Like, I think you just ride it out with your former number 1 overall pick. But
So
yeah,
I was going to say, so the one thing that we should preface with here, they're a game under 500.
yeah,
Normally that'd be okay in the AL Central. Not this year.
not
That's
this.
7.5 out. You're not going to get the wild card. Wild card's not going to benefit the AL Central. And the Guardians, sure, they might come down to earth a little bit, but they're way ahead. The Royals are just a better team at this point, and the Twins are a better team at this point. So the point being, you're not trying to win this year. I mean, I'm not saying you should just fold and turn over, but they're not in a spot where it's like, oh, we can make a run. I think it's going to be really hard for the Tigers, though I think they're going to play competitive ball and think they can hover around 500 for most of the year. But to kind of get back to what you were saying, for that reason, they should be looking at the pieces that they can sell off similar to Lorenzen. But that said, they're also not far away from being competitive. And I think next year they could be a dark horse playoff team. Because
So
what you mentioned with some of these pieces that you can look at, and Harry Carpenter looks like he is a sustainably good hitter. And we've talked about him for a long time, but it's just he's hit that next level. Riley Green looks like the Riley Green we've been waiting on. those are core pieces. Cole Keith is coming to life, which is so exciting. That's like some of the core offensive pieces here. But you can move a Canna and Urshela. I mean, you could blackmail other teams to take Javier Baez. You still are going to hold on to Torkelson, of course. But those are the pieces you probably move off, and it's kind of working between the margins, I would say, probably, right? This deadline for the Tigers, just selling off some rental pieces for the most part.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I also think if you get the right return for Jack Flaherty, you think about moving Jack Flaherty. His stock is high at this point, man. Like, he looks
Oh yeah, you're
rejuvenated.
moving Flaherty on a 1 year deal.
You
Cash
move
in,
him.
and
Like,
you'll do better than Lorenzen on
oh,
that.
way better. Way
You'll
better.
get
So,
probably 2.5 how you lease, or maybe even more.
yeah. So, my thing is, I view a bedrock of Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, Torque, for better or worse, Colt Keith. I I'm close to slapping Wenzel Perez in that, like, even if he's a bench bat, but man, like
There's no
he's
reason
off
to
to.
trade him.
No, they're not going to trade him. But then, like, I look at Skubal, I look at Reese Olson, and I look at a rejuvenated Casey Mize, and I'm like, okay, let's roll with this. And then Jason Foley in that bullpen makes a ton of sense. But like, a Lang has taken a step back. You think about moving Lang if there's like some serious value there. Chafin on what, a 1 year deal? Why don't you move Chafin to a contender? That kind of thing. So like, I just look at it as, hey, let's trim off the pieces that may not be a huge element in our 2025. The big one to me
Yep.
that I get hung up on is I want to see a runway cleared for certain guys. You trade Urshela to get Jace Young in that lineup. You trade, Flaherty to get a Job or a Ty Madden in that lineup, or a Kiter Montero in that rotation. Sorry. And like, that's what I want to see happen. You can move a Mark Canna to get Justin Henry Malloy to the big leagues. That is the level that I want to see Scott Harris work at this deadline.
Which is why the one guy with control that I would consider moving is Matt Manning. And I know he might not break he might not change your organization with the return that he brings in, but a right-hander that, has first round pedigree, has shown flashes at the big league level,
With 4 years of
competitive
control.
enough, can eat innings, a lot of control. There's a lot of teams that would be interested in a move for Matt Manning, even if they're not even totally competitive this year. But it's a guy that, if you're on the outside looking in, you add him, he helps you in your playoff run, and you feel good years ahead. The reason why I mention him is because you mentioned the runway for some of these other guys. And you could say, oh, but it's risky. What if some of these younger guys don't step up? Sawyer Gibson Long's also going to be coming off the IL. He had an internal brace procedure done. I think Sawyer Gibson Long is a better arm than Matt Manning at this stage. I,
Yeah.
I, I just think when you look at the stuff and the command and what he brings to the table, and he's only, I think, no, they're the same age. They're the exact same age.
They're
So I
26.
would rather have Sawyer Gibson Long get that opportunity, cash in on Manning as well if he starts to throw a little bit better. He's been fine, but not great. But with the control, and a team might look at him and say, hey, we can maybe unlock a little bit here and get him, a little bit better. I don't know if they'll say that because the Tigers obviously have one of the best in the biz in the pitching, coach side and pitching development side at the big league level. But I think Manning's a guy that could end up bringing in a sneaky return too, since it's mostly rentals. Mark Canna, I love him. Guy might get them a nice little return too.
For sure.
Another team question, and this is what we'll wrap up on because, of course, I feel like we're always talking about this team. How should the trade deadline look for the Blue Jays? That comes from Tim Ellison on Instagram. We got a lot of Blue Jays questions. Canada does not know what to do with their Toronto Blue Jays right now, and I don't blame them. They are a frustrating team. They have done what we recommended early in the season, which was play Davis Schneider more. Shocker. It's worked. It's helped them offensively. Playing the guy that gets on base more than anybody in your lineup, playing him more, batting him leadoff, results in success. Crazy stuff. But other than that, I mean, they're in a really weird spot. They're 4 games under 500. They're very much a win now built team that is not winning now with a mediocre farm system and not really a clear direction one way or another. Your young pieces that you're supposed to be building around are not really performing, and you have decisions to make on those guys. I don't envy the Blue Jays situation in the slightest.
Nope.
If I was in control there, if I'm Atkins, I'm stressed because you're in a situation where it almost feels like no matter what, you can do wrong.
Yep.
And maybe that's because that's a situation he created for himself. But at the same time, could you have expected Bo Bichette, who went like 4 for 4 the other day? Hopefully he comes alive. That changes things. But would you have expected Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero to be what they are? The last, even you can even go back to last year, more with Vladdy, but Would you have expected that? Like, no way. But at
No.
the same time, you push the chips forward on Varsho. He looks like actually one of the better pieces, although he's come back down to earth. George Springer, you paid a lot for. He just looks like he's old out there, man. Like, it just, for whatever reason, you signed Kevin Kiermaier. That's why he looks old out there. For whatever reason, you signed Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. He looks old out there. And the thing is, those guys aren't bringing you back anything. You're just hoping somebody would take on their contracts, let alone bring you back anything. Danny Jansen's been good. Kirk, is anyone
No.
really taking him? Sure, maybe, but that's not giving you a good return right now. And Jansen's walking, so you got to keep Kirk. And all of a sudden, the team with 3 catchers is going to end up with 0 unless they extend Danny Jansen. It's going to be half of one, I guess, if you consider
Incorrect.
Alejandro Kirk, that guy for you. They're stuck. And we didn't even get to the pitching where, Gausman's starting to show his age a little bit. Bassett's showing his age. Kikuchi's been great. Barrios has been great. Manoah's back.
Dude.
I would blow this shit up. Point
Uh-huh.
blank. I'm blowing, and like I kind of almost wanted to like ease into that and like still like go through it one last time in my head. Blow it up. What are we doing? This isn't
I
turning around. It's not going to get better next year. And it's not going to get better the year after that unless you blow this MFR up.
I don't think Ross Atkins is with the Blue Jays after this year. I don't think John
Hell no.
Schneider is with the Blue Jays after this year. Um, we'll see what ownership says to them. I think the only way you get this massive boulder moving downhill is if you trade Bo Bichette. I think that's the only way you kickstart this. And I think that is one of the moves you would make if you're saying blow this shit up, is it not?
Yes. And honestly, I think it's trade Barrios. I think it's trade Kikuchi.
You think it's trade Barrios too? I think
He's
I think
30.
Kikuchi for sure. Kikuchi right away, you just do it. I think you could trade Gosman too
You can hold
because he's
Barrios.
expensive over a couple of years.
You can hold Barrios because you got him under control until 29. I think that's a fair counterpoint. It's the AAV that you're getting with Barrios. It's going to be below the qualifying
That's
offer
right.
for a player. So
So I think the
you
way
hold
you really get
Barrios.
this thing moving is you trade Bichette, you trade Gosman, and then after that, you see what you can get. And it's like, hey, by the way, George Springer's available. Okay, that's great. I'm not touching him. Like, it's that
Yeah,
kind of thing. If somebody wants to rent Justin Turner, who's swinging it okay enough, go ahead. But those are the two big ones that like get this thing started. Aurelvis Martinez needs a spot. Addison Barger needs a spot. Like we need to see what's happening moving forward. And right now, like they're old and they're in last place. And
yeah,
that, sucks to say because they were so exciting on paper going into even last year.
yeah. And even blowing it up, like they might be still sneaky decent next
Yeah,
year if they do
man.
it right. I agree. Barger needs a spot, or Relvis needs a spot. Both those guys immediately plug in. They're big league ready. You've got Varsho, who's not going anywhere. You've got Davis Schneider, who's not going anywhere. I agree with holding on to Vladdy at this point. And maybe that's a guy that you end up extending because of the jersey sales and things like that. Danny Jansen, I think you should try to extend because he's 29 and
Yeah.
you can do this pseudo rebuild. I think it's more of a restructure. It's more of an overhaul because just the veterans that you brought in just aren't working and it's not going to magically start working soon. You can get a huge return for a Kikuchi potentially if he keeps throwing like this. You can get a really good return for Gosman if he, I think starts to throw a little bit better, and I think he will. And I think you hold Manoah. And all of a sudden you have Barrios, you still have Manoah. I think you hope Tiedemann's healthy and can slot into the rotation. You can sign a couple bounce back guys. You trade Yimi Garcia. All of a sudden your farm system is revamped. You have guys that you can plug in immediately, and you're going to have a lot of money coming off the books too. And especially when Springer's up and some of these other guys are up, and you can attack free agency all over again. I'm not saying they need to rebuild. I just think they need to totally restructure and undo the gigantic mistake that has been this roster that Atkins put together.
2021 Cubs, right? That's when they moved Baez. It's when they moved Rizzo, Bryant, Jock Peterson was a 1-year signing. They moved him to Atlanta. They got nothing back, but guess what? That open spot to, give somebody else some runway there. I think that's the kind of thing that you can look at where it's like, hey, windows closed. We're old. Let's ID who we think can be on this team in 2027. I am pro extend Vladdy because he's not going to be expensive at this point. I think you get Vladdy for 4 years, 75, 4 years, 80. I think he says yes to 20 a year across 4 years. And like that sounds like, oh, that's way too much. Like, look at his war numbers. More goes into that than the Fangraphs page. Like, he's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He was on the cover of a fucking video game this year. His dad is a Hall of Famer. Like, you got to remember that he is a franchise cornerstone because of things that happen off the field. And on the field, he's going to hit enough to be worth $10 million at first base. You could pay him 10 off the field otherwise.
And he's already starting to swing it better. And at the same time, too, like, it's a sign of good faith to the fans. Like, hey, this is not a teardown.
No.
And I love the Cubs example because they restructure, and by 2023, they almost make the playoffs. And
Yes.
I think a couple balls bounce it a couple different ways, and the catch is made, and they do make the playoffs. And this year, we're looking at them as a legitimate threat. And what do? They went out and signed some free agents. They replenished the farm system, and they built not only a team that's now competitive, a team that's sustainably good, instead of just trying to put together veterans and make it happen. It just never works, and then you get stuck in purgatory. And if the Blue Jays don't do this, if they stand pat, they will be in purgatory.
Yes.
That's no doubt thing for me.
Yeah. And guess what, man? Like, the Rizzo return. Who's up at this point? Nobody. Like, Kevin Alcantara, we're getting tired of at this point in Double A. And then the other guy was an arm that came over. I think he's out of the Cubs system at this point, I think. I'm blanking on who that was, but that was the Rizzo deal. The Bryant deal, Canario and Caleb Killian, they've provided minimal help to the big league club. And, they both debuted. Okay, Canario, I think, can be fine if given extended run, but like, he's not getting extended run. And then PCA, I know he's a top 100 prospect in all of baseball, but it's not like he's contributed in droves at the big league level. Like, you moved all those guys. They're not really helping at the major league level, but you've still improved. Like, it's just the idea of starting from scratch.
Yes. And giving your young guys opportunities too that were already in the org. And
Yes.
you hope that you do better on those trades, and the Cubs did, and you're in an even better situation very quickly. So I think that's an excellent point. And again, the young pieces that they have right now will make them they're not going to be bad. Even if you tore this all down, they wouldn't be bad. They'd be still good enough. And especially if Barger and Elvis play the way that we think they can, and they've got some other pieces throughout that system as well. I think it's a no-brainer to do that. And I know if Atkins gets fired and some of these other guys in the front office get fired, they will. Whoever takes over will do that. And I think it would be the right move, whether fans want to see it or not. And I think at this point they probably do. I think they're probably tired of this group, to be honest. That will do it for this episode and this mailbag. Jack's 2024 mailbag debut was a lot of fun.
Hour 22, not bad.
That's not great.
It's not good, but it's not bad.
Not good. Not good. Honestly, that's kind of me and Peter numbers, man. You're supposed to be Mr. Brevity, and you're not much shorter than when me and Peter get together.
Well, it's us two until I think next Wednesday's show, because Peter's out gallivanting in Cancun. So, like, hey, man, congrats on the vacation. We're going to put out, I think, a 22-minute episode tomorrow.
Isn't it like a bachelor party for like his best friend? You asshole?
I think it's a wedding. No, it's a wedding.
It's a legit wedding. It's
a legit wedding. Crazy.
Yeah, and Peter's already upset. Peter's gonna be listening to the podcast in Mexico. I'm guaranteed he's gonna be like, "Damn it, I need to get back to work."
Yeah,
he's gonna. I need to get back in there.
I'm itching, man. Why didn't I bring my mic?
Why am I here? No. But that'll do it for this episode. Hopefully, Peter's having a wonderful time in Mexico, much deserved. And we will be back the rest of the week. It'll be me and Jack getting after it, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.